Hey brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behaviour Revolution Scriptures. Just had another hectic morning around here doing school drop-off, and I've got an hour or so before my first client. But it's another lovely, beautiful day up here on the Atherton tablelands. It's 10 degrees outside. It's freezing. But we've got things to talk about here, haven't we? Last episode we dealt with Sodom and Gomorrah and the wickedness that was going on in that city, and how Lot and his family were delivered. Was it on the Feast of Passover or was it not? Interesting. But upon Abraham's pleading with Yahusha, Lot and his family were saved delivered into the mountains. And now we're going to go further into the life of Abraham and what Yahusha does fulfilling this promise. Remember, he cut a covenant with Abram and then he renewed it with Abraham, who was a circumcised man, and promised him any seed that came from his circumcised body would be sealed in the covenant, in the protection, and given the promise of the land. And this would pass down from generation to generation. And also that his seed would be slaves, would be captives in a land that's not their own, and then they would, after a while, be delivered. So this is laying the foundation of what's going to come, as we know, soon. So let's go into Yitzchak. This is the promised son, the son that was promised to Abraham. Yitzchak, or who we used to call Isaac, pronounced Yitzchak. And as promised, Yahusha visited Sarah the following year at the appointed time of Passover. Remember, the Yahusha and his two messengers appeared to Abraham while he was sitting under the terebinth trees and said, "You're going to have a son." And Sarah was in the tent mocking as if that's going to happen, you know. And sure enough, as promised, Yahusha visited Sarah the following year at the appointed time of Passover and allowed her and Abraham to fall pregnant with a son. It's a lot of times that it's actually the time of Passover that we're not told. But when you look into the different books and do some research, it's the appointed time of Passover. Did they go and slaughter lambs and do the whole blood on the doorpost? No, because that was what Yahusha told them to do in Egypt. But the appointed times have been going since creation, since the fall anyway. Yahusha's appointed times, because there's 7 of them, the pattern of 7 days, 7 Shabbats, a week, you know, the weekly Shabbats, the Shemitah cycles, the whole cycle of 7 is going from the beginning of time, and it's still going now in Yahusha's mind. And we still see the 7-day week now. We rest on the 7th day. We should be resting all the land in the earth on the 7th year and celebrating a Jubilee year, but we don't. That's the state of the world. Anyway, so it was the time of Passover. Yahusha allowed her and Abraham to fall pregnant with a son. And when the child was born, they circumcised him on the 8th day, as Yahusha had instructed. And they called him Yitzchak. Many things happen on the 8th day. And we're going to see as we go on this pattern of doing the 7 days, and then on the 8th day, it's like the first day of the new cycle, because you have 7 days and then you go back to 1 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to 1, which is the 8th day, really, isn't it? So 8th day, Yahusha, as in Yahusha had instructed, they called him Yitzchak. Circumcised him and they called him Yitzchak. Abraham was 100 years old when his only son, from his circumcision was born. So this is his only son. Oh, but he had Ishmael and he might have had some other sons. That was from his uncircumcision. This is from his circumcised organ, his circumcised body. And I explained the difference in the videos before. There's a big difference between the circumcision, because the blood was shed, his penis was cut, the blood was shed, so any seed, sperm that passed through his circumcision was sealed. That was the sign of this. At this point, this was the sign of the covenant. Not this covenant, the covenant. This was the sign, at this point of the covenant history, this was the sign of it. And I want to mention that also. I keep getting flustered and I keep correcting myself in my words, because I was brought up in Christianity and we were taught there was the Edenic and there was the Adamic and there was the Mosaic and there was the Davidic and the Palestinian, all these different covenants, which there are covenants made with different people, but It's the same covenant. So I'm sorry I keep correcting myself on that. The reason is because the covenant that was made with different people had to be made, he had to tweak it to do with different people. The covenant didn't change, but the behavior and the practices did change. Does that make sense? Behaviors changed. We don't have to go and be circumcised today. Oh, but the covenant Yahusha made with Noach, about the earth, that still stands. So why don't we have to still get circumcised? Because Yahusha fulfilled that. It didn't mean he put it. It doesn't mean he abolished it. It means that he came along and said, "There's no reason for you to shed your blood." That's what circumcision was about, shedding blood. There's no need for you to circumcise yourself anymore or be circumcised, because I've now shed my blood, and my blood has done it. No more animal or blood sacrifices are permitted, because my blood is one and only and once and for all. So it's not that he said circumcision is abolished. It's that he's saying the circumcision is a different behavior now. Instead of taking a knife and cutting the skin off your willy, he takes his knife and he cuts around our hearts. He gives us a love for his Torah. So he doesn't, I'm trying to drum into myself as well, that he doesn't change. He doesn't get rid of any covenants, because he doesn't change. The covenants are who we are. And his instructions don't change. The main 10 instructions, the everlasting covenant that he gave Moshe at Sinai, they were still the same instructions that he would have given Adam and 𝗂𝗜𝗓. Don't kill each other, don't steal, be kind, love one another, all these respect, it's who he is. They don't change. So there's not different covenants, there's one covenant, one everlasting blood covenant of deliverance. It's all about deliverance. But the behaviors that were expected, the way they had to perform within the covenant, changed over time. Does that make sense? We don't have to dress the same way as they did 4,000, 5,000 years ago. We no longer have to circumcise our willies. We don't have to, there's many things we don't have to do anymore. Things we don't have to say or wear, or the way they worshipped. Are we supposed to gather together and blow our big trumpets and have hundreds of choir singers and all the things that they did in Solomon's temple? No, we don't have to do that, because the behavior has changed. The instructions don't change, behavior changes. We live in the 21st century, so it's important to know how we're supposed to behave today in the 21st century. Did any of that make sense? The covenant does not change from Adam to Noach, to Abraham, Moshe. Then they had a covenant in the land of Yisrael. Then who was next? David, and then not long after that, Yahusha came along and fulfilled, made alive. He breathed life into his covenant. This was all a pattern. This was all I'm teaching you all how to behave. I'm teaching you all about blood and water and bread and all these things he was teaching them about, because one day I'm going to come along and start talking about all these things, and what do you do to a prophecy? You fulfill prophecies. He's going to come along and fulfill all these things and breathe life into them. And I want you to know what I'm talking about, guys. So I want you, for the next 1,000 years, 2,000, all these thousands of years that go along here, I want you to start living this way, so that when I come along, you will appreciate what I'm doing. You will see what I'm doing, because you will have, your mind has been washed in all these instructions to do with the covenant. But of course, when they came along, religion, Ⅎ𝗏, his wicked minions, had filled them all with rubbish, so most didn't even recognize him. And that's why he called out his emissaries. But I just wanted to make that side point, because I keep balking myself as well. There's not different covenants, there's one covenant. One everlasting, eternal covenant. Anything else that we don't have to do today was ceremonial or customary. There are lots of things that when we go into the book of Leviticus that we're not required to do today. Does that mean Yahusha changes? Does that mean he changes who he is? No. But customs have changed. Hygiene has changed. We live in a much cleaner world now. In the Western world, we have running water, we have toilets, we have, There's different things that have changed. I've gone on enough about that. Let's go back to Yitzchak, because he hasn't even been, yes, he has been born. He's been born. This is going to take a long time, isn't it? So, Abraham was 100 years old when his only son from his circumcision was born. At this point in time, circumcision was very important. This was a sign of the everlasting covenant with Abraham. His oldest son 𝔹𝕗𝕋 was born to him before he was circumcised, before his name and covenant was renewed. I think I've covered that. And Sarah laughed and laughed with great joy, saying, Yahuwah has caused me to laugh out loud, and everyone who hears about this laughs with me as well. I mean, who would have ever said that Sarah would nurse children and give Abraham a son at this age? Definitely not me. I mean, think about it. From the age of a teenager, a woman can give birth. She's been waiting till the age of, well, if Abraham's 100, she's in her 90s. 90, she's about 91, 92. So she's been waiting all that time in her life. And all the women around her are very fertile and giving birth to baby after baby after baby after baby, and she's got nothing. So imagine how ecstatic she would be. And remember, 90-year-olds didn't look like they do today. 90 is the new, 15. So as far as if you're going to live to 900 years old, 90 would be about 15, wouldn't it? Yeah. Just being silly. And Yitzchak was nursed by Sarah, and on the day he was weaned and able to eat solid foods, Abraham threw a grand feast for him, as you would, and was rejoicing that he was favoured by Yahusha in having 2 wonderful sons now. But in the midst of the celebration, Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, her servant, who was a teenager, bullying Yitzchak and giving him a hard time. Then he proceeded, Yitzchak, so he was bullying Yitzchak. Ishmael was bullying Yitzchak. And then Ishmael went and danced with Abraham with great joy and celebration. And Sarah was jealous of the feeling and relationship Abraham was having with Ishmael. So Abraham's gone for 15 or 16 or so years with Ishmael as his only son. So they've got this wonderful bond. It's his only son. Now he's had a son of the covenant with Sarah, and Ishmael's jealous, and Sarah's jealous of Ishmael, because, you think about it, I can understand this because I'm in a blended family now. There's children and parents that don't line up blood-wise. And it takes time to get to know and love other people's children on both sides of the coin. So you've got this exact same situation here. Abraham had a child with Hagar, their maidservant, to get the covenant going, and he loves the son. Probably has affection for the woman too, their friend, she's part of the family. But Sarah, who had the rights to have the child and have Abraham alter herself, Sarah is furious because he's got this teenage boy who he loves with all his heart, and now he's got and this teenage boy's marked his territory. He's peed all around the camp like a lioness. And this little boy, this baby's come into it. So Ishmael was bullying Yitzchak, and then he went over to dance with Abraham like nothing had happened. And Sarah saw this. And the day before, she'd seen Ishmael taunting her little Yitzchak, threatening to shoot him with an arrow. This is all written in the book of Yahusha, guys. So, in her fired up emotion, she put her husband in a dreadful position, saying, "This is the last straw, Abraham. I've had it up to here with this disgusting woman and her son. There's no way he is going to inherit the promises of Yahuwah with our son Yitzchak. No way in hell. Get rid of them immediately and let us live in peace." She's a fiery woman, isn't she? And Abraham saw red. He was furious. Abraham saw red because he loved Ishmael very much, and he hated the way Sarah felt about him, despite his son's mocking behaviour. Any of you who are in a blended family know that. other adults, the person you've married often treats your children the way you wouldn't, and it happens on both sides because there's a different amount of affection, and we grow into each other and we grow into each other's children. We grow into it, and at the beginning, it's just a cesspool of drama, getting used to it, and children in the midst causing trouble as well, and stirring up trying to turn parents against parents, and it's all happening. We've been through all this, and we sort of mellowed out a bit now, but this was happening. Abraham was furious at his wife because of the way she felt about his son, because it wasn't her son. But while his anger was still stewing, Yahusha said to Abraham, "Calm down, Abraham. Stop taking this situation so personally. Listen to the words of your wife." Interesting. Because as far as I know, in my opinion, she's totally out of line. I mean, he was mocking, but he's a stupid kid. And she's going, "Get rid of them." But they're family. It's my son. I can't get rid of them. It's unreasonable. It's an unreasonable request, isn't it? So I'd be furious too. Your son's causing trouble. Get rid of him. Who wouldn't be furious? But look what Yahusha says. Listen to the words of your wife. No matter how unreasonable they might be, listen to the words of your wife and don't be troubled or angry. So Yahusha brings life into the situation. He calms everyone down. Listen, just relax. Stop taking this so personally. That's a rule, isn't it? Listen to the words of your wife and don't be troubled or angry. For I'm going to make a great nation out of your son Ishmael as well. For even though my eternal blood covenant will flow through Yitzhak, Ishmael is still your son, and I will look after him and his mother. Is that a promise or what? You don't have to worry about them, Abraham. I will look after them. So listen to the words of your wife. We don't want any more drama in the camp. Just like he said to his nephew Lot, there's too much drama in the camp, we've got to split. Same thing happened here. Listen to the words of your wife and just flow with it, mate. Let her have what she wants and make her happy. And watch what I'm going to do. That's what letting someone have it is about. Watching what Yahusha's going to do in the situation. So, it wouldn't have been easy, but he did what he was told. Early the next morning, he took bread and a large skin of water, big skin, bottle skin thing of water, and placing it over both Hagar and Ishmael's shoulders, he kissed them, and with much sadness he sent them away. And the two left Abraham's camp and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And after the water in the skin was all used up, Hagar sat Ishmael under some shrubs and fell down nearby, so she didn't have to see her son die. But Yahusha heard the cries of Hagar and her son, saying, "What's wrong, my daughter? What's wrong, my daughter? Don't be afraid, for I've heard your cries, and I will indeed make a great nation from your boy. Now rise up and keep going." And Yahusha opened Hagar's eyes so she could see a nearby well of water. So as soon as Yahusha spoke to her, she noticed in the distance a well of water. And she filled up the skins, and they both drank and were refreshed. And Yahusha indeed looked after Ishmael, and as a man he became an archer. The green arrow, he was an archer man. Living in the wilderness, where Hagar found an Egyptian woman for him to marry. So he was from the uncircumcised seed of Abram, and he married an Egyptian woman. So you can see that that's kind of outside of what Yahusha was doing through the line. His descendants, that's why there's so much drama in the Middle East now. Who's going to take over the Holy Land? We deserve the Holy Land. It's all earthly, it's all madness, it's all affairs of this life that we don't even need to get involved with, because Yahusha's going to burn it all up anyway. Do we all need to pack all our bags in the end times and move to Jerusalem? Yerushalayim? Do we have to do that? A lot of believers are taught that you have to go and move to Jerusalem. But that's geographical, and everything on this earth is going to be burnt up. And when the new Jerusalem comes down, if it sits on the Mount of Olives, if it sits on Jerusalem, which many believe it will, it's going to be a different one, because the whole earth's going to be burnt up. So all this taking over, that this is all UN and, you know, from the oligarchy anyway, from the powers that be, the billionaire, trillionaires that rule the world. There's only a handful of them. The bankers. It's all very conspiracy, but it's true. All this Holy Land debacle was set up by the UN, which is, you know, Ⅎ𝕗𝕗𝒻's plan. Let's go on. Abraham's covenant with the Abimelech. The Abimelech. Remember, this is just his position. Around this same time, the Abimelech, the king of Gerar, visited Abraham with his army commander, saying, "We have seen your success and blessings." And word of the miraculous birth of Yitzhak had obviously travelled. And it's obvious that your Elohim, your mighty one, walks with you, Abraham. Now let us make an agreement that you will be honest and true, even though they're not. This, you know, as I said in videos before, Abraham had as many people and camp and possessions as a king. He had stacks of people. He was like a little nation all of his own. So he was starting to become a threat to the actual kings around him. So this king came out and said, look, let's make a covenant agreement. Let's cut up some animals and make an agreement that you'll be kind to me and I'll be kind to you, because, you know, he didn't want Abraham turning on him. So that you will be honest and true, not only with me, but my children and their descendants too. I've been loyal to you, so grant me the same courtesy, since you are a stranger in this land of mine. Don't you forget you're a stranger in this land, so you make this covenant, mate. Abraham's wealth and entourage was actually bigger than the Abimelech's. So you can see, because when we read it, we think, oh, the king came out and ordered Abraham to do this and that. Well, he didn't have to. And Abraham knew. But because he was a kind man and not really interested in all those things, of course he made the covenant. Abraham said, of course I will. But not before confronting the Abimelech about the well of water. Now, wells of water were a big deal, guys, because that's how you drank. That's where your water came from. If someone knocked over, you know, filled in your well or, you know, took over it, you had no water. So a very big deal for the survival of his family was the well of water. So, which the Abimelech's people had seized by force from Abraham's servants. So Abraham thought, yeah, well, of course I'll make a covenant with you. I don't want any drama, but you bloody will give me back my well first, mate. So this is the first I've heard about this. I'm not responsible for your well being taken. Why haven't you mentioned this before? Abimelech said. So he hadn't heard about it, or had he? Was he making an excuse? I didn't know about it. Then Abraham made a covenant agreement with the Abimelech using sheep, goats and cattle. But he also gave the Abimelech 7 additional female lambs. What are these extra lambs for, mate? The Abimelech said. I want to make it official between us that this well of water belongs to my family, because we dug it ourselves, said Abraham. And in agreement, they called the place 𝗓𝗓𝗓. So often, because Moshe wrote this book, wasn't the place already called 𝗓𝗓𝗓? No. When Moshe wrote this book, Genesis, Bereshith, from the very beginning he calls places, and they walked through 𝗓𝗓𝗓, even though it may not have been called that yet. He still refers to it because the people in his time that were reading what he wrote knew that. So often the naming of it is out of chronological order. So it happens with 𝗓𝗓𝗓, Bethel as well. How many times did it get called Bethel? Plenty of times. But he just wants you to know that geographically that's where they were. Even if it hadn't been called that yet, that's where they were. So in agreement, they called the place at this point 𝗓𝗓𝗓, because the two of them had formed a covenant agreement in that place, allowing Abraham to take claim of the land surrounding the well. So he's got some land. He's taking claim to some land. He's a happy boy. Then the Abimelech returned to Gerar, and Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in his new homeland of 𝗓𝗓𝗓, rejoicing and celebrating that Yahusha had ended his days of travelling to and fro like a gypsy. And even though he was still technically a foreigner, Abraham settled in 𝗓𝗓𝗓, the future land of the Philistines, for a very long time. So he's technically still a foreigner, but he's got some land of his own to settle on. He'd made an agreement with the king, so there weren't going to be any dramas there. Let's go to the sacrificing his only son. We've got a big span of time here when 𝔹𝕤𝗏 was 37 years old. So it's not some young, feeble boy. 𝔹𝕤𝗏 was 37 years old. He's only 5 years younger than me. So when 𝔹𝕤𝗏 was 37 years old, Yahusha decided to test Abraham's belief and said to him, Abraham, I want you to get your only son, 𝔹𝕤𝗏, who I know you love very much, and travel to the land of Moriah, or Moriah, and sacrifice him to me as a burnt offering on the mountain I tell you. What? Sacrifice his only son? And Abraham, this is clever, Abraham thought it wise not to alarm his wife. Can you imagine how that would have gone down with that fireball of a wife? Imagine that. You ain't sacrificing my only. Get stuffed. Get out of here, Abraham. That might have cracked open that marriage. And Abraham thought it wise not to alarm his wife, for he knew that his son would, this is interesting, he knew that his son would indeed return home safely. He knew that his son would come home with him because of the blood covenant Yahusha had made with him regarding his only son. Does that make sense? We've been talking about blood covenants for episodes and episodes now. There's only one son, and yeah, sure, he could have had another one, but Yahusha promised that the line blood covenant would carry on through 𝔹𝕤𝗏. He said it himself. So in order for that to happen, he'd have to be alive. So can you see that as hard as it would have been, Abraham understood, the idea. And for us, that sounds really cruel too, but you have to understand, and read this part in the turquoise here, unlike the surrounding nations that regularly sacrifice their children. Remember, that's happening now. At this time, the parents were taking their newborn babies up to Moloch, up to the idol, and sacrificing them so that they'd be blessed, they thought. This is all the sun worship and the pagan idolatry that's going on. So this was surrounding them. So sacrificing children, it wouldn't be as evil as it was. It's not shock horror. Yahusha was asking him to do something, but he knew there would be a resurrection. Unlike the surrounding nations that regularly sacrificed their children to their pagan deity Moloch, Abraham obviously knew that his son would be resurrected in order for Yahusha to fulfill the promises. Wow, how much did he trust Yahusha? How much did he trust Yahusha? So that was going on around him. So the whole idea of sacrificing his son, that they were sacrificing people all the time. They were sacrificing animals. They were cutting animals' throats and, slaughtering animals. And the custom they lived with involved a lot of bloodshed. It would be different if Yahusha said it to us today. He wouldn't say it to us today because it's not a cultural, it's not context, it's not how we operate today. And sure, nations are being wiped out today and babies are being murdered. But it's generally, most of them, in the womb. It's called abortion. So it's a very different culture we live in today. Ⅎ𝗏𝗏 is a lot more sneaky. So the point I want to make here is that Abraham thought there would be a resurrection, the whole idea of death and resurrection. And 𝔹𝕤𝗏, Isaac, is likened to a type of Yahusha in the scriptures. Yahusha is giving them these instructions, and for us, telling us these stories, that true stories, that he was washing their minds, like I said in the beginning, for what he was going to do. So rising up early the next morning, Abraham and 𝔹𝕏 kissed and embraced Sarah, took 2 of their servants, split all the wood they needed for the burnt offering, prepared the donkeys, and travelled 3 days to the land of Moriah, as Yahusha had instructed. So they set off. And this is interesting. You won't find this in the canon, but this is in the book of Yahusha. And I wanted to add it because it's just like that wicked, sneaky little Ⅎ𝗏𝗏. It's just dreadful. Shaitan appeared to Abraham along the pathway as a feeble old man, saying to him, "You stupid fool, what kind of father slaughters his own son, who he's waited for his whole life? Do you really think this is from Yahuwah? How could you do something so cruel to an innocent boy? The reason these touched my heart, even though they're wicked, is because if Yahusha tells us to do something or puts us on a pathway, gives us a plan in life, whether it be, for mine is to buy a house and achieve in that way. That's me personally. If Yahusha gives you something that he wants you to do, Ⅎ𝕗𝕗's always there. Do you really need to do this? Look, do you? And it doesn't just come to you, it comes through everybody around you to pull you off the path. That's how wicked he is. That's how much he hates Yahusha and what Yahusha's doing in his bride. He'll come in there. Is it true? Is it really true that you're not allowed to eat that fruit? Is it really true that you can't behave that way? Here, look, try this instead. Look, he's sneaky, he's cunning. Offers beautiful, luxurious, bling and shiny, bright things for us to look at because he knows we're so stupid. Oh, look at that. You know, stay on your path. Yahusha had given Abraham a path. Go and sacrifice your son to see. Because if it's anything like the days of Job, he probably had wicked messengers up there saying, oh yeah, Abraham's obedient, isn't he? But what if you tested him? That's what happened to Job. Yeah, Abraham's all your, yeah, he's your top man, isn't he? Yeah, but what happens if times get tough, eh? Yahusha, will he still be that obedient? So he tested him. And look at the horrible thing Ⅎ𝕗𝕗 said to him. But Abraham knew it was the enemy trying to knock him off his path of obedience. So he told him to get lost, and he did. But a little later, he appeared to 𝔹𝕗𝕗, so he couldn't get the father, and now he's come to the son. He appeared to 𝔹𝕗𝕗 as a handsome, rich young man. So he appeals to what we like. He appears as something that will appeal to us. No point appearing as an old man to a young man. He appeared as a young, rich, handsome man, someone appealing and handsome, someone that might allure 𝔹𝕗𝕗 and impress him. So he appeared a little later to 𝔹𝕗𝕗 as a handsome, rich young man saying, did you know that silly old bugger of a father plans to kill you on that mountain? That's right. Your whole life will have been for nothing, and your blood will be shed in vain. Don't listen to him. You are young and so handsome and have so much of your life to live. Putting those seeds into 𝔹𝕗𝕗, trying to split the father and son up from the plan they had. This is interesting. 𝔹𝕗𝕗 turned to his father. Dad, what's this crackpot talking about? Oh, him? That's just Shaitan, our enemy, pestering us not to obey Yahuwah again. And Abraham told Shaitan to get lost, and he left them again. Moving further up the road and appearing as a mighty river, he appeared as a river, rushing in front of them. The men entered the river up to their legs, but as it got deeper and the water rose up to their necks, they all became afraid of the rushing water, and Abraham suddenly recognized the place. Suddenly dawned on him that he knew this place. There's not supposed to be water here. And he knew that there was usually no water there at all. So he rebuked the enemy again, one last time, and Shaitan was terrified at the voice of Abraham and fled for good, and the waters disappeared. Isn't this what Yahusha did? Isn't this what others have done in the wilderness? Isn't this what we do? Rebuke, resist the enemy and he will flee. You don't even have to rebuke him, just ignore him. He's mad. Resist the enemy, resist what he wants you to do, ignore his voice and do the opposite, you know? So the point I want to make here, did you know that he could appear as a river? Ⅎ𝕗𝕗's very powerful. He's got lots of divine power that we don't know about, lots more. He can create things that we don't know about. Look at this turquoise section here, because this is about the behavior I want to address. It's interesting that 𝔹𝕗𝕗 immediately told his father about the enemy's lies. Unlike Adam and 𝗂𝗏, who entertained his poison, then partook and went along with it. And when they approached Yahusha's chosen place, from a distance they saw a mighty pillar of fire shooting from the sky on top of the mountain, and the glowing esteem of Yahusha in the clouds surrounding it. And Abraham knew that they were in the right place. This is in the book of Jubilees. So he instructed his servants to stop and stay there with the donkeys while he and Yitzhak travelled a little further up the mountain to make the burnt sacrifice and worship, telling them they would be back soon. They would be back soon. And Abraham took the wood for the fire, placing it on Yitzhak's shoulders, and after grabbing the knife and the fire, the two of them travelled. How do you grab fire? Well, you probably had a stick with some fire on it to carry up there to light the burnt sacrifice. The two of them travelled further up the mountain. While they were walking, Yitzhak turned to his father, saying, and this is our favourite scripture that we always bring up at Passover. Yitzhak turned to his father, saying, "Hey, Dad, we've got the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Because he knew that if you're going to make an offering, you needed blood. You needed an animal. Where's the animal? Which obviously says that Abraham had not told his son yet. Shouldn't we find it before we get up there? The lamb? But Abraham reassured his son, "Don't worry, my boy. Our master Yahuwah will provide the lamb himself today." And they kept walking until they arrived at the place which Yahusha wanted. It was the appointed time of Passover. Very interesting, that. It was the appointed time of Passover. Many people agree. So, hey, Dad, we've got the fire and the wood. There's the question in bold there. Where's the lamb? That bold orange there is the question, and the bold blue is the answer. Where's the lamb? Yahuwah will provide the lamb himself. Can you see where we're going with that? Yahusha, who is our lamb, he provided the lamb for us. We don't have to sacrifice lambs. We don't have to bring lambs along to our altars anymore and cover ourselves in the blood, or the altar in the blood. The altar is us. So he provided the lamb. He himself offered himself as the spotless lamb. So even way back in Abraham, we're talking where he's washing their minds, getting them used to what he's going to do. And Abraham built a stone table altar, placed the wood on it, bound his son Yitzhak, and laid him down on top of the wood. So would he have told him what he was doing? Possibly. He was 37 years old and Abraham was 100, so, there could have been a conflict. There could have been a fisticuff if Yitzhak didn't want you forget it, man. You ain't cutting me up. You ain't killing me. He could have punched his father and run away. So it doesn't say that, does it? Yitzhak trusted in Yahusha and also in his father's intentions. Yitzhak trusted in Yahusha and also in his father's intentions, and he did not struggle. He did not struggle, fight, or argue in any way, but was willing to be sacrificed in obedience as a burnt offering unto Yahusha. Isn't that just like Yahusha? He didn't struggle. He didn't fight the Romans. He didn't fight the Yahudim. He didn't fight anybody. He didn't save himself, jump down off the torture stake and blinded them all or do anything. He didn't do that. He went to the altar. He went to the torture stake. He sacrificed himself as a lamb unto the slaughter without complaint. Then Abraham stretched out his hand, took the knife, and was about to kill his only son because he believed he'd come back to life. Nobody had up until this point, but he believed. This is the thing about Abraham. He believed. His belief was phenomenal. Stretched out his hand, took the knife, and was about to kill his son when Yahusha called out from the sky, "Abraham! Hey, Abraham, stop! Stop, man, stop!" And Abraham suddenly stopped. "Yes, master." "Do not harm the boy or touch him, for I am satisfied with your obedience and belief, and I can see that you fear me and trust me and would not hold anything back from me, not even your only son." He wants to know that we won't hold anything back from him. We won't keep any secret little evils, secret little possessions, anything that, if you've got something in your life that you would not be willing to give up, to give to someone else, if it's a possession, a behavior that you're not willing to do, something that you're not willing to give over to Yahusha, then are you passing the test or failing the test? Because Yahusha said to Abraham, I can see that you trust me and would not hold anything back from me, not even your only son. It's not like he had a whole lot of them, it's his only son. So before we finish, guys, because I've got to get to work, we're going to look at this Mount Moriah, because that was the mountain they're on. The significance with this mountain, Mount Moriah it was called. Have a look here, the similarities, because I'll go up a bit higher, Mount Moriah, so you can see it better. Yitzhak, you've got Yitzhak and you've got Yahusha. The similarities here. Yitzhak was the only son, Yahusha was the only son. Yitzhak rode on a donkey, Yahusha rode on a donkey. Remember he rode into the city on a donkey? Yitzhak carried the wood himself on his shoulders. Yahusha, remember they put the torture stake on his shoulders and made him carry it up the hill. He carried the wood himself. Yitzhak, Yahusha provided the lamb. And in the case of Yahusha, Yahusha was the lamb himself. Yitzhak, the ram was caught in the thorns. Yahusha, the lamb was crowned with thorns. Yitzhak, on the mountain of Moriah, outside Shalem. Yahusha, Golgotha, which is Mount Moriah, outside Jerusalem. One was Shalem, one was Jerusalem, later called Jerusalem. Both the men did not resist. Both the men were returned after 3 days, or resurrected after 3 days. And then there's the question down there, where is the lamb? Yitzhak said, where is the lamb? And Yahusha provided the lamb. And Yahuwah Yireh, it will be seen and provided. It's also interesting to note that Solomon's temple was also built on Mount Moriah. So the same place that Yitzhak was sacrificed was the exact place where Yahusha was sacrificed. And Abraham looked behind him and saw a ram tangled up by its horns in a nearby thistle bush. So where's the lamb? Yahusha provided one. Suddenly there's a ram over there. Look! And it had its thorns tangled in the bush. Another interesting thing, there was a thistle bush that was burning. When Yahusha introduced himself to Moshe, there was a thistle bush. Thistle bush. And this is a thistle. Yahusha had prepared this lamb as a special sacrifice and had sent it charging towards them to intercept Yaakov's death. So he wanted Abraham to notice the lamb running through, but of course, Shaitan held it back, tangling its horns in the brambles so that he'd kill his son and lose his belief maybe. You know, like, Shaitan's wicked. But Yahusha called out, stop, stop, and they saw the ram. So Abraham quickly took the ram and sacrificed it to Yahusha as a burnt offering instead of his only son. And Abraham named the place of the stone altar Yahuwah Yireh. Back in the circus view, Jehovah Jireh, my provider, Jehovah Jireh. Well, this is Yahuwah Yireh. Yahuwah Yireh, Yireh. What does that mean? On the mountain of Yahuwah it will be seen. Most of us used to think it just meant Yahuwah will provide, but it means more than that. It will be seen. On the mountain of Yahuwah it will be seen. What will be seen? Was it the covenant on Mount Sinai that would be seen? Maybe, but we're not talking about Mount Sinai, are we? We're talking about Moriah. So what will be seen on this mountain? What will be lifted up and seen on this mountain? Because Yahuwah Yireh, it will be provided. What will be provided and what will be seen? It was on this very mountain, many generations later, that Yahusha himself provided the sacrificial lamb of his choosing himself, who was lifted up and seen by all. Isn't that amazing? Yahuwah Yireh. It will be seen on the mountain. Yahusha provided himself as the lamb, and we see. And Yahusha spoke to Abraham from the sky a second time, my son, because you have chosen to obey my voice and not withheld anything from me, not even your only son whom you love. I will definitely bless you, and indeed your children will be as many as the stars of the skies and as many as the sand on the seashore, and they will conquer any enemy that rises against them. And through all your descendants, the nations of the earth will be blessed, because on this very day you have chosen to listen and obey my voice. Interesting also that when he was Abram, he was promised as many descendants as the stars of the skies. And to Abraham, he promised as many descendants as the sand on the seashore. After this test, he's promised stars of the sky and sand on the seashore. Interesting. More and more and more. Through your descendants, the nations of the earth will be blessed because you have chosen to listen and obey my voice. And they all returned home to Beersheba. Little interesting thing here before we finish. In the book of either Yahusha or Jubilees, I forget, it mentions, it has been written, look in the turquoise here, it has been written that Shatan went to Sarah before the boys had returned home and told her that Abraham had sacrificed Yitzhak as a burnt offering. And the shock of losing her only son caused her to have a heart attack and die. She went running around looking for them, and she was just filled with grief. And then apparently Shatan appeared to her and said, I was joking, he's not really dead. And she dropped dead from a heart attack. Interesting theory. Whether it pans out or not, I don't know. But at the same time, right after this account here of the sacrifice of Yitzhak, we see next, at the age of 127 years old, Sarah died in the land of Canaan, and a completely devastated Abraham wept over the body of his bride for many days. We're not going to go into this section. I have to go, guys. I've got to run. So we will pick it up here next episode, the last part of Sarah dying, and then we're going to go into Yitzhak's wife. Abraham sends his servant out to find a wife for Yitzhak, and we see the pattern of marriage and how we're supposed to approach and court, be betrothed, married, consummation, all the idea of marriage. So stay tuned, brothers and sisters. It's been a pleasure. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Worship Elohim. Blessed are all those who have been chosen. Worship Elohim. Called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise. Let us be glad. Let us be glad and rejoice and be in praise. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has prepared herself. Let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise. Hallelujah, for El Shaddai reigns. Hallelujah, for El Shaddai reigns. Worship Elohim. Blessed are all those who have been chosen. We worship Elohim. Called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Hallelujah, deliverance, honor, esteem. Hallelujah, respect and power to Elohim. Sovereign of sovereigns, master of masters. Praise him, all you servants of Yahweh. Shall we worship Elohim? Blessed are all those who have been chosen. We worship Elohim. Called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. Called to the marriage supper of the Lamb.